order examinations, even when they are not needed, or if they are needed but slightly, is the new tendency worldwide. We have got huge examining bodies. They also put limits on the number of attempts. They charge quite heavy fees, and at the end of that, they might give you something which you would have it even if they were not there. The topic today is the licensing examination, which is to be conducted by the Pakistan Medical Commission in order for the doctors to get licensed. There have been protests, there have been incidents in which the doctors got injured protesting the beginning of such examinations, putting new examinations which were not present before. This requires that the topic should be dealt with in some detail. For a good student who is really good, examinations are a way to show himself above and beyond the others. But we often feel that that is sometimes not the case, because the examinations are conducted by such bodies which, in the guise of studying the exam procedures and adjusting the scores and so on, can be involved in corruption. The danger of corruption is very high in a national examination, because examination of these types are conducted by very few people, and most of these people who make the paper, they are invisible people. The people who arrange the results, they are again invisible people, and a candidate can hardly only settle for asking for a recheck of his paper or something like that. Nothing more than that, and that too after a fee. That's the usual situation in case of examinations. There are a few advantages of a licensing examination. One of the advantages could be that some of the medical colleges which are not that good, or which are not regarded that highly and therefore have got less fee, might benefit in the sense that the parents would be willing to have their children admitted in them, because at the end of the day, whether you are from a more prestigious college, more expensive college, or a cheaper college, you are subjected to the same examination. I am somewhat surprised that some of the owners of the smaller medical colleges oppose the licensing examination, even though from their marketing point of view it helps them. Regarding the students themselves, one of the problems which has been faced by teachers over a long period of time is that if the medical college teachers have no grip on any of the good which is going to come to the student, and he is not an examiner, or his examinership is not comprehensive, or in some way his role is reduced, then they have got a difficulty in maintaining their, what you might say, awe in the campus, and they could have difficulty in maintaining the discipline in the campus. Already it has been reported that some of the private medical schools look upon their students as not so much as students but as their clients, and teachers of private medical colleges report to us that there's pressure on them not to fail these so-called clients in annual examinations. So the teachers are forced to put in some small quizzes from time to time to make the students study. There are also reports that the students, they think that having paid a fee of, let's say, 10, 15, 20 lakh a year, they are entitled to a promotion, and get very much upset if a teacher has not found him to be of sufficient pass standard. The result of that is that sometimes the product at the end of 5 years is not as good as you expect. And licensing examination has the potential to correct that, in the sense that it would be something which is bound to possibly raise some standard, provided the licensing examination themselves are of sufficient standard and done honestly. I must point out that it is often said that in national licensing examinations, we are following some other countries, like, let's say, United States. Even in the United States, the famous ECFMG, the External Commission for Foreign Medical Graduates, initially started as a private body, and with a limited function, and gradually extended. And it is, I think, at least I remember in one occasion that the ECFMG papers by ECFMG which are held internationally, got leaked. And this can always happen in examination of this type. And another thing which is problematic is that in Pakistan there is a tendency of people in power, whoever they are, to artificially support either their special kins, or to support their ethnic groups and alter results. Or even there have been allegations of people accepting benefits from outside countries, and sometimes adding to the numbers of maybe one or the other gender, particularly female gender, so that certain requirements or something, if there is something to show that certain forms education in certain groups, or certain in certain gender groups is doing very well in the country. Well, these are allegations, and obviously they cannot be taken as true unless there were any inquiry or something like that. We know that in a legislation is being thought of to be brought in around 2024 in the United Kingdom also, on such type of lines of national some new types of examinations. But one of the reasons that new types of examinations are brought in some of the Western countries is really to get rid of some of the people who have passed the various examinations before and are now eligible to work in these Western countries, and they just make a new legislation so that to render the previous one ineligible, and the organization. A good example of that is for example, the secession of category of limited registration in the United Kingdom around 2007-8, rendering thousands of doctors who had qualified PLAB based on the previous type of exam and entering into a new type of registration and asking them to, uh, you know, cancelling that type of registration and putting a more full registration, but a new exam also. One of the difficulties which is occurring is that while the country is involved in a very serious uh, coronavirus waves again and again, and doctors are dying, and the hospitals cannot function fully, was basically no time to start experimenting with new forms of councils and new forms of commissions and new forms of exams, which are bound to be controversial. I think these could have been delayed for a year or two or three, when there is some pressure on us to uh, make our system like that from some international community or something like that. One of the problems in Pakistan is that sometimes, knowing quite well that most of the consumption of our graduates is within Pakistan, but still, we tend to follow uh, the patterns of which, as if everybody is going to immigrate to West or something like that. For example, instead of having old BA and MA and so on, which was a very well tried system, we have put long 4-year BS programs and things like that, which the parents cannot easily afford. And the interesting thing is that some of these programs are just stuffed with uh, semesters and subjects which are not really going to be useful from the point of view of technology, which these guys ultimately have to face. Uh, Examination should not become a business. Another important aspect of examinations is, and that has got legal connotations, is that once you pass a paper or so-called part of an examination, it is highly unethical that a student should be asked to repass that if he does not pass the next part or the next paper. Because if once you have evaluated somebody in one part or one paper, there is no point to ask him to repass it again and again and again. And I think that we should not allow any examining body, whether it is local examining body or it is the foreign examining bodies like British Council, or which conduct various British exams, to make the degrees time limited, in the sense that you say that, okay, here this exam has 3 parts, and if you don't pass 3 parts within, let's say, 2 year or 3 year or whatever, you will have to do it again, or so many attempts or something. You see, what is actually passed is basically passed. One should go ahead. I don't see any legal justification for asking a person to repass something which he has already passed and you have thoroughly evaluated, whether it is an individual paper of an exam or it's a portion of an exam. Another very common tendency is to put the limits on the number of attempts somebody can do. This can be very damaging for people who are from lower socioeconomic background, and like, let's say, females, or those who cannot take full-time education. Because if you put more and more these types of rules, that you should pass something in 7 years, or you should pass something in 4 attempts or something like that, what you are not understanding is that a country which has to develop like Pakistan, more important is that our people have an army of educated people people who know, who have the knowledge. One of the very funny type of argument which has come from, especially I find it in the British institutions, especially I find it in literature by the exams conducting by the British Council or something like that, is that what they say is that our exams are to discriminate between good and bad students. I don't think that is all. One of the purpose of the exam is to make sure to cover the curriculum of what somebody has and to make sure that somebody has done that curriculum. There is no point in not having a proper textbook and start putting questions from various things and then selling old papers and then making new questions and so on. I mean, although that is there is my slight validity in that also, but the basic purpose is to educate somebody. Coming back to the licensing examination in Pakistan, I remember that once, in those days I was waiting for a job and there was an advertisement by the Punjab Public Service Commission, and I appeared in the Punjab Public Service Commission examination. They said that now we are going to have an open written paper. I was very happy. I knew that I would be able to pass that, maybe a little bit above others. And within about 5 minutes I started the examination. There was fire in the tents, and a person who was supposedly my friend, and I knew him, he just tore my paper, and that guy was never studying. He was often just chasing girls in various places, and he was sure basically he can never get a post through Public Service Commission in an open competition. And I think the students, good students, should realize that if an exam is conducted in a proper way, in a competitive sense, open merit, he is going to benefit. And the people who oppose merit are usually the ones who want to defeat merit and who are really not very competent. Having said that, there are certain reservations on the Pakistan Medical Commission itself. One of the problems with the laws of this medical commission is that it tends to somewhat tends to create two basic problems. The first one is a legal problem, and that is that if a body is itself composed of several bodies, it creates legal issues over a period of time. And I'm sure that medical commission will face various types of legal challenges regarding its own composition over a period of time, because such type of hybrid bodies is unusual for Pakistan. In Pakistan, when you legislate for a body, you make a unitary body. You don't make that you would have a PMDC also, and then you will have another thing also. And secondly, because Pakistan has got a British type of system, so the name itself creates problem, because like for example the Malaysian National Council, the Australian Malaysian Medical Council, or the Indian Medical Dental Council, or the British General Medical Council of Britain, or the Australian Medical Council, generally speaking, the patron is not of a commission in the British speaking world, and that would create additional problems. Then there is the principle of self-regulation in medical profession. The doctors want their profession to be self-regulated, as in case of lawyers, as in case of engineers, and generally in democratic countries self-regulation has been the norm. What has actually happened, for example, in United Kingdom in early 90s, there have been a few cases in which the General Medical Council of UK was not able to properly stop somebody or shipment inquiry and things like that, in which there have been malpractice by the doctors and serious what you might crimes by the doctor, and there was this call for the medical council to have a lot of lay representation, starting with, I think there were 104 members, and out of that 25 were lay, and then later on that increased to maybe 50%, and then there was 24 members, 12 lay, 12 others, and I think there were 12 now. There are 12 now, and 6 lay and 6 others, and so on, like that. But one of the fundamental reasons in the Western world of the lay people trying to get control of the medical profession is the money part. The various political parties of the Western countries, because they spend a lot on health, so they want their political workers and other people to be adjusted into the health field. And one of the reasons this COVID-19 is not stopping and is causing so much devastation is that it is not just India or Pakistan where the medical profession is not in control of the COVID policies, whether administratively, financially, or otherwise. It is also in USA, it is also in UK. The politicians are trying to handle the COVID, to make the policies on lockdowns, on every other aspect of the thing. And obviously they don't know what to do, and this is what is happening. In countries, there are certain countries where the senior nurses are sometimes the heads of the various regional health bodies, and the doctors are obviously working there and so on. And one of the problems is that even within the medical profession, if you have a serious democracy working at all levels, one of the problems is that obviously there are going to be many more nurses and paramedics than the doctors, and among the doctors there are going to be many more GPs than the specialists, and so on. And that tends to reverse the pyramid from an intellectual point of view, that the one who is regarded as the highest in the expertise and whatever you might say, intellect or something or whatever, or technology, is working under somebody who is not doing that. You see, there are problems in self-regulation also. People don't punish sometimes the errant doctors or something like that, but that does not mean that we should be making commissions, whether in Pakistan, medical commissions or something, which are dominated by lay people, which are dominated by people who are not that deeply into science, not that deeply into technology and arts, because after all we are a country which is not developed. We have to develop. If we start putting people with lesser qualifications or people from totally outside the system, we start to appoint members nominated by the maybe some body or judiciary or some journalists or some liars or whatever, at the main decision making and of the medical profession. And I don't think that is the proper environment to develop a medical body, even though the intentions might be good. There has been a lot of opposition to the new things as they cropped up in KPK, for example, in the last few years, and then later in Punjab, and it's still going on, because one of the problems is that so far as the employment is concerned or something else is concerned to give benefits, the state does not seem to recognize MBBS as a professional degree. They still try to give stipends to house officers rather than salaries, and still try to give even stipends to postgraduates rather than giving grade 17 or 18 salary with all the benefits. And just because if somebody is learning more and more and more and more and will go on for the rest of his life does not mean that he is typically that a student. Although you may be student in a theoretical way, but that is not, you are not really a student. You are, when you did your MBBS, you became a doctor. You have to have a salary. And then, there is tendency of increasing the duration of the programs, long durations, and particularly when the medical field, with there are a lot of women in the medical field and in society of Pakistan, when we like the women to get married, as soon as possible after the education, let's say below 31, 32, and then, we subject them to endless long programs, and you cannot get a attachment or anything in a FCPS program, and then you go on late and more attempts and so on. What are we heading towards? What do we want? Even in the Western world, are they now the leaders of the technology of the world? Not really. Not really. The rise of China, rise of other Asian countries and so on. Some of these things have not followed the pattern. And finally, I would say is that not everything which comes from the West or the Harvard or anything which is taught in certain universities can be that good. For example, for the last so many years, the banks are not paying much profit or interest, whatever you call, to the account holders in the Western world. But in spite of that, their industries are not progressing that well, and they are still losing out to competition to the other competitors. The system is not working. And for example, our people who are brought in from World Bank and things like that, and all types of institutions to advise us, all what they advise is to balance the books, and they say that we should just devalue our currency, and for the same number of dollars we should send them more things cheaply and so on. I don't find that there is much sense in this. After all, there used to be a chapter in the law books, the law of common sense. But anyway, let's not go that far. And I think that the doctors should concentrate more on their education and everything. And if a licensing examination, which will inevitably be put up either even in future by some other government also ultimately, as that seems to be the tendency worldwide, to concentrate more on their terms and conditions and more on the way the medical profession is treated by the governments and the slots and the career opportunities, and not interfere too much into small things. So overall, I feel that we are not really progressing that much. And in the midst of the COVID, introduction of the Pakistan Medical Commission ordinance, and then national licensing examinations and so on, was not really a very wise move. It should have been delayed when the national crisis and the economic crisis is over, and everything in a democratic country requires proper consideration and opinion of the stakeholders, followed by certain pilot projects to see whether there are any bugs in the system, and then introducing it slowly with the connivance, with the free will of the profession. Personally, I feel that if the medical profession is rendered free of political advice, free of judicial, too much judicial interventions and so on, and we really recruit people on the basis of intellectuality and on the basis of technology transfer, and we are open to overseas Pakistanis and getting contracts here, and we remove these retirement ages and things like that, both from the public service commissions and so on, and concentrate on technology transfer as the sole criteria and performance of a doctor in recruitment. We might head somewhere. We cannot just head by replacing PMDC with medical commissions or putting an exam somewhere on the line. These are just things right and left. They don't address the main problem of importation of technology transfer, cheaper health care, and a kind of doctor who is available and who wants to do something good. With this, I close this comment, and I hope that you will like it.